I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd leave their own father in jail. But after everything that's happened, I can't bring myself to help him anymore. This all started 2 years ago. I'd been saving money since I was 16 for a house down payment. Between working through college, living with roommates, and being careful with every penny, I'd managed to save $35,000 by age 27. It wasn't enough for a house in our expensive area, but I was getting close. Then my dad called me with what he described as the opportunity of a lifetime. He wanted to start a small business, a food truck that would eventually grow into a restaurant. He'd always been a good cook, and it had been his dream for years. He just needed some startup capital. "I've got investors lined up," he told me excitedly, "but they want to see that I have skin in the game too. If I can put in $35,000, they'll match it with $50,000. It's a sure thing." I was hesitant. My relationship with my dad has always been complicated. My parents divorced when I was 12, and Dad was the fun parent who'd sweep in for weekends, spoil me, then disappear. As I got older, I realized he wasn't great with money. He'd been through bankruptcy twice and was always chasing get-rich-quick schemes. But this time seemed different. He had actual business plans drawn up. He'd researched food trucks in the area, calculated operating costs, even identified potential regular locations. He showed me projections that suggested I'd get my investment back within a year, plus interest. "This isn't just for me," he said. "This is for us, a family business, something I can leave to you someday." After weeks of discussion, I agreed to loan him the money, but with conditions. We signed a formal loan agreement, notarized and everything, stating he would repay the full amount within 18 months, with 5% interest. The agreement gave me the right to see the business accounts and specified that the money was solely for the food truck business. For the first month, everything seemed fine. Dad sent me photos of food truck models he was considering and talked about menu ideas. Then the updates became less frequent. When I asked direct questions about the business progress, his answers got vague. By month 3, I was getting seriously worried. I asked to see the business account statements as per our agreement. He dodged, made excuses, promised to show me next week. After several more weeks of this, I finally told him I was coming over to see the paperwork in person. When I arrived at his apartment, he broke down. There was no food truck. There were no investors. He had gambled away every penny at a casino, convinced he could double the investment before I noticed anything wrong. I was devastated. That money represented years of sacrifice over time shifts, missed vacations with friends, cheap apartments with questionable roommates, all gone because my father couldn't control his gambling addiction. I took him to small claims court for the maximum amount they allowed, then civil court for the remainder. I won both cases easily with our signed agreement as evidence. The judge ordered him to pay me back in monthly installments. He made exactly 2 payments, totaling $1,200, before he stopped paying altogether. When I called to ask why, he said he was going through a rough patch and would catch up soon. He never did. I tried wage garnishment but discovered he'd quit his job. I considered seizing assets, but he didn't own anything of value. The legal victory was meaningless. I couldn't extract blood from a stone. Eventually, I had to accept that I would probably never see that money again. I mourned the loss, adjusted my financial plans, and moved on. I limited contact with my dad to occasional text messages, mostly him asking how I was doing or sending memes like nothing had happened. I responded politely but distantly. Other family members told me he was still struggling, but I didn't ask for details. Fast forward to last week. I got a call from an unknown number around midnight. It was my dad, calling from the county jail. He'd been arrested for check fraud. Apparently, he'd been writing bad checks for months. His bail was set at $5,000. "I know I messed up with you before," he said, his voice shaking. "But I'm your father. I need your help. I'll pay you back this time, I swear." I told him I'd think about it and hung up. Then I sat on my couch for hours, thinking about all the times he'd made promises he didn't keep. All the times he'd chosen his addiction over his responsibilities. All the money I was still trying to save again. In the morning, I called the jail and asked about his situation. The officer confirmed he was being held on multiple counts of fraud, with evidence that suggested this wasn't a first-time offense. If convicted, he could face significant jail time. I decided not to bail him out. I couldn't afford to throw away another $5,000 that I'd never see again, and frankly, I didn't trust that he'd even show up for his court date. Maybe facing real consequences would finally force him to get help for his gambling problem. When I didn't show up with bail money, he started calling other family members. My aunt, his sister, paid his bail the next day. She then called me, furious, saying I was heartless for leaving my own father in jail overnight. "He made mistakes, but he's still your father," she said. "Family doesn't abandon family." News of my decision is spread through the extended family. My grandmother called me crying, asking how I could be so cold. My cousins have sent messages ranging from gently questioning my decision to outright calling me cruel. Even my mom, who has no love for my dad after their divorce, suggested I was being too harsh. The only person who seems to understand is my stepsister, from my mom's second marriage, who pointed out that helping addicts avoid consequences only enables them to continue their destructive behavior. Dad is out now, awaiting trial and apparently telling everyone who will listen that I abandoned him in his hour of need, conveniently leaving out the part where he stole $35,000 from me and never paid it back. I'm standing firm in my decision, but with so many family members upset with me, I'm second-guessing myself. Did I do the right thing, or am I really the heartless daughter they're making me out to be? So, Reddit, am I the a-hole for not bailing my dad out of jail after he stole my savings and never paid me back? Edit. Wow, I didn't expect this to get so much attention. Thank you all for your perspectives. To answer a few common questions. Yes, my dad has a diagnosed gambling addiction. He's been to therapy and even Gamblers Anonymous a few times over the years, but never sticks with it. He always quits when he hits a lucky streak and thinks he has it under control. No, I haven't told the extended family all the details about the money he took from me. My dad is very charismatic and has a way of making himself the victim in every situation. Most of them know he borrowed money from me, but not the full amount, or that he blew it gambling rather than starting a business. For those asking about my aunt who paid his bail, she's always bailed him out, literally and figuratively, throughout his life. She's his older sister and has a major blind spot when it comes to him. Despite my explanation, she believes he made a mistake and deserves forgiveness. Update. It's been about 3 weeks since everything happened. My dad pleaded guilty to reduced charges and got probation, plus mandatory counseling for his gambling addiction. The judge also ordered restitution to the victims of his bad checks. I've had several conversations with family members explaining my side of the story more completely. Some have come around and apologized for judging me. Others still think I should have helped him, regardless of our past issues. But the pressure has mostly died down. My dad sent me a letter. He knows I won't answer his calls, saying he understands why I didn't bail him out, and that he's finally ready to get help. He's made similar promises before, so I'm skeptical, but I hope for his sake that this time is different. I'm continuing to focus on rebuilding my savings and maintaining appropriate boundaries. It's not easy, but I know it's necessary for my own well-being. Sometimes the hardest decision is the right one. Am I the a-hole?